Moadim L'Simcha, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we sang Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim at the Seder this year. It was definitely with a lot more emotion and intensity than in previous years, having not been able to go to Israel, been in Israel for a long while now, well over a year, I think for most people, maybe up to two. We're definitely missing it a lot and wanting to be there more than ever, especially as we see from the news coverage how Israel's far ahead than everyone else and recovering and coming out of the pandemic and enjoying this Pesach with a real newfound freedom. Places flooded with, thank God, people able to go places and traverse the land. We can't be there, but we can, as we've done in the past Chagim and past days, special days in the calendar this past year of Corona, bring Israel to us somewhat. We once again have Eiran Gordan, our tour guide, our resident tour guide nearly, with us. Thank you, Eiran, for making the time, putting it together. Today's presentation, tailoring it towards our Tanach Talks series, where we've had a number of talks, part of our communal learning project, learning the Tanakh together and having talks on Tanakh-related topics. And tonight has a Tanakh twang and spin on it. So thank you for doing that. Without further ado, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much to those of you who have yet to meet me. Hi, I'm Eiran Gordan, coming to you live from the Neve Michael, which is in the Elah Valley. Just outside is where David and Goliath faced down 3,000 years ago or so. I live in Yerushalayim, and I'm very, very delighted once again to be joining you and to be sharing some of the things, some sites, some places, some ideas with you. I was consulting with Rab Shmuley about exactly what we should focus on for this particular talk. And he mentioned the focus on the Tanakh, and we have in the previous talks in the series, we've visited many sites from the Tanakh. And while there's always a fascinating new angle to take, we didn't want to, I was a bit hesitant. I didn't want to revisit anything that we'd covered too in depth. And that really wasn't a problem, thankfully, because I had a beautiful idea. And that is to combine the theme that you have of the Tanakh and the theme that we have at this time of year. We are right in the middle of Chol HaMoed Pesach, and it is a time of Aliyah L'Regel. And please God, may we soon see Aliyah L'Regel of the entire Jewish people to celebrate the Korban Pesach in Yerushalayim. But I thought of focusing on the different holy sites for various reasons, the different places which have been the center of Aliyah L'Regel. And the idea of what I called it, altars, sanctuaries, and temples. And there's an interesting
Stop trying to get in trouble. I don't want
to ask those. There we go. Sanctuaries, temples, and there's an interesting plural over there. We're going to get to that. What do I mean by temples, altars, and sanctuaries? Nevertheless, we decided to combine those to experience some of the places in the Tanakh. And while we're going to do that, I first wanted to start with something which isn't actually from the Tanakh. It's very peculiar and it's very interesting. And I think if we're dealing with temples, it's one of my favorite things. And that's not actually in it is a place that you can visit in person. However, it is also a place which you can visit in the Israel Museum. My favorite room in the Israel Museum is, in fact, it's called if you go straight in, if you're familiar with the layout of the Israel Museum, you go in, you go through the entrance hall of the archaeology section, which has got these beautiful beautiful coffins from Egyptian style coffins, not quite sarcophagi, but then you just go straight through. There's a prehistoric room, and the next room over there is called the Chalcolithic room. Chalkos is, of course, Greek for copper. Chalco and lithos is rock. So the Chalcolithic means the copper stone age. And that is the site that I wanted to just begin with, because it's just such an enigmatic and fascinating place. That is something which is actually prehistoric. And over here over there, we can see a stripe of sea off in the distance. We can see some date palms. And if you're seeing that that combination of desert and date palms and sea can put you in only one place. And that is, of course, at the Dead Sea. We are looking down on the kibbutz of Ein Gedi. There's a tent over there, which is where the ancient Beit Knesset, the Shul of Ein Gedi with this beautiful mosaic is. That's definitely a topic for another talk. I'm just thinking ahead. But in the foreground, we've got something else. There's a very strange stone structure. And it seems so archaeologists, when excavating it, Pesach Baradon was one of the main chief archaeologists involved. Is also just a fascinating individual, self-educated archaeologist, let's call him that. But he discovered this temple, this building, which he believed to be a temple. And if Chalcolithic means about 5,500 to 6,000 years ago, which means that this is pre-writing. There's nothing written down about this place, which means the very first thing that we have is a mystery about who the people were. We call them the Canaanites, but actually we call them part of the Rasulian culture from Tulelat Rasul, which is just across the Jordan. It's a Chalcolithic site, but we don't know who the people are. We don't know who their genetic descendants are. We know very little about what they thought, what language they spoke. We know almost nothing about them because they didn't write anything down. Nevertheless, in a nearby cave, there was in Nachal Mishmar, there was a hoard of objects found. And that is what really makes this site so amazing, because we found almost nothing at this site itself. But what we see in the next over here, this is what was found. This is taken in situ in the cave. And we're seeing there's actually I don't know if you've been following in the news, there's also a lot of talk about things found in caves. They found a new Dead Seas, one of the new Dead Sea Scrolls, what they're calling it, in the Cave of Horrors. They found a straw basket 6,000 years old. And over here, we can see that there is a straw, not a basket, but this is a mat. And all these copper artifacts are rolled up in this mat. This is before the Bronze Age. This is at the very beginning of people working with metals. And if you look closely, you can see that there are things which look like candlesticks and mace heads. And there's even right in the middle of that entire mixture, there's something which looks like an ibex head. Can you see that one? So this is the Nachal Mishmar hoard, and it is widely assumed to have been the artifacts, the sacred items of the temple of Ein Gedi, the Chalcolithic temple of Ein Gedi. And it's currently on display in the Israel Museum. And every single time I go there, I have to just stop for a moment just to marvel at it, because it looks so strange and almost alien and unfamiliar with anything that we may encounter. But at the same time, it's so ancient and it is so perfect, thanks to the conditions of the Dead Sea. And over here, you can see some of the artifacts. You can see the stands, the ceremonial stands and horns and mace heads. They obviously had some sort of processionals. And this is really interesting, is we can see ibex. This is the Dr. Doolittle, push me, pull you. Or something very similar. It is an two-headed ibex, the two-fronted ibex. We got a scepter. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that because it's just an amazing way to launch into this before we even get started. But of course, if we're talking about the places which are holiest, and I don't mean in the sense of an ancient Chalcolithic temple, I mean in the sense of the Tanach, the places that are holiest, we need to, of course, go back to the Avot. And we find that each of the Avot visits various places. Each of the Avot is commanded by Hashem, builds Mizbeach, whether it is wherever they are, whether it is in Beit El. We see Yaakov doing it in Beit El. We do it in outside Shechem. We see it happening in Hebron throughout the whole of the Sefer Bereshit. We see the Avot visiting different places. And the problem that gives us is that we know very often where the places are, but finding actual Mizbeach of one of them a much, much bigger challenge, because very often places have been reused. It's trying to find the evidence of a single person making their way through the land of Israel about 3,800 give or take years ago is definitely a challenge. But there are some places, and we'll hopefully see a couple of those, and we'll be able to see the connection to some of those. But if we actually want to find sites where we can see the impact, where we can see the archaeology, where we can see with our own eyes what has been left behind, we need to go forward in time, because we've got Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, hopefully know the words of Seder. What happens next? Vayered Mitzrayim, they go down to Egypt. And let's skip to the end of the Haggadah, because Hashem, because at the end of it, the fifth cup is the cup of being brought, the cup that we leave out for Eliyahu, is a cup which we're not sure if we should be drinking yet, because Hashem took us out of Egypt, but have we yet experienced the Geula? We're waiting for Eliyahu to confirm that we are ready for that. And what we find is that the point where the Seder leaves off, the place where Yetziat Mitzrayim leaves off, is what the Jews in the desert, Dayenu leaves off. In the desert, they receive the Torah, and then they go into the land of Israel. And this is where we're going to really begin, because what happens, the very first thing that they do, they go across and they cross over by a place called Gilgal. If we look closely in the Tanakh, the name Gilgal repeats itself. It seems to be, Gilgal is a language which seems to speak of circles, which seems to speak of circular motion, of rolling. There's the Mefarshim say that the Brit Milah, that the mass circumcision which takes place at Gilgal, is because of the shame which the Jews experienced for 40 years of not performing Brit Milah in the desert, rolls off them at Gilgal. Nevertheless, it seems that there are several places called Gilgal, and the question is exactly where those are. Well, where did the Jews come from? From the desert. What did they do? The Yarden, the Jordan River, stopped, and the Jews crossed over, the children of Israel crossed over, and they are told, Joshua is instructed to conduct an entire ceremony at Har Eval, but first they cross over, they conquer the city of Jericho, and then they really get started. And what we find is there is an amazing archaeologist who unfortunately passed away several years ago. His name was Adam Zertal. He was a fascinating individual he was at the University of Haifa. And he was, unfortunately, he was injured in a battle in 1974 war. He always walked with crutches. He never did. And he would hobble around. He was born in a kibbutz, and part of the very skeptical attitude towards the Tanach as a whole. And nevertheless, he became the expert on the sites of the Tanach, and especially of the Shomron, of the northern area of the West Bank. And he became known affectionately as, the settler's archaeologist. And he took it with a pinch of salt. He was very much not in the mainstream, and very much standing against the norms of archaeology. But he had some fascinating ideas, and we're going to bump into him a couple of times. So Adam Zertal thought that the Jews conducted surveys firstly he conducted surveys in the entire area of the Shomron, and he felt that the Jews must have left an impact in the places that they visited. And near Jericho, he found a place in a couple of sites in the Jordan Valley where he found a very, very interesting thing happening. And if we actually just have a look at what he saw. Okay, so right over here, you should be able to see, this is Google Earth. We can see that right over here, we've got the Dead Sea, we've got En-Gedi just at the bottom of the screen, right over there. Here's Jericho, the first site which is conquered upon the arrival of the Bnei Israel in the land. And just north of that is a place called Argaman. And over here, if we have a closer look at Argaman today is a Jewish yeshuv in the Jordan Valley. You can see the Jordan River is just to the right of the screen. And what Argaman has just outside it is something very interesting. We can see it over there, in the just to the northeast of the Moshav of Argaman, just to the north of Zubaydat, which is an Arab village. There is something interesting. And what Adam Zertal noticed, at Argaman is that there was this peculiar shape in the ground, and it's almost the foot. And he thought that this, well, he called it a kaf regel, a footprint, literally, the footprint of Eiran. And he conducted a survey, and what he discovered, and let me put this in full screen. Okay. Are you seeing the slides over here? On the left hand and on the right hand side, there's a schematic. Each one of these is a different version, these are not actually the same size. The size of these sites is approximately 2 football pitches length to length. They are absolutely massive. And what Adam Zertal found in the middle of each of those is firstly a paved, or not paved, a flattened compound with a low wall around it. And in the middle, he found an altar, a mizbeach, made out of field stones, which is not the common practice in Canaanite times, but is the way that the Jewish people are instructed to build their mizbachot, to build their altars. And Adam Zertal's theory, which he created around this, is that this is, in fact, when we talk about aliyah le regel, what he says, this is a regel. This is a kaf regel, and it's a very deliberately shaped like a right foot, because the place where the foot treads is a sign of ownership, is a sign of mastery. And Adam Zertal believed that when the Jewish people arrived in the land at Gilgal, what was the significance of Gilgal? He believes that one of these sites is the biblical Gilgal, that this is in fact the place where the Jews are claiming the land. And that was the significance of Gilgal. What they've also discovered is that around the entire site, around the Mizbeach, there are bones only of kosher animals, which is unique, which is especially at the time period we are talking about, which is at the kind of transition between the Canaanite and Israelite culture. We're finding only kosher animals. That tells us a lot. Found shards of broken pottery vessels, single use. And this is Adam Zertal's theory, is that what we are looking at is Gilgal. What we are looking at is the footprint, the initial footprint of the Jewish people as they arrived in Israel. When we talk about being aliyah l'regel for Pesach, this might be the original, linguistically, the original intention of the word aliyah l'regel is to indicate an ownership, indicate a mastery, and indicate a permanence of position in the land and at the holiest sites. Nevertheless, this is definitely a place where a mizbeach, where an altar existed. And if we have a look over here, here's just a bit of a flyover of the entire site of Argaman. There we go. You can see it's a massive, massive area out in the Jordan Valley, which means right on the edge of the desert. And right in the middle, you can see there's a paved compound with a small altar in the middle of it. And we know that Joshua is instructed to build altars firstly at Gilgal when they arrived. In fact, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was the first place that it stood in the land of Israel, was at Gilgal, and only after was it moved. So perhaps one of these is the site of the initial site of the Mishkan, and perhaps this Mizbeach is the actual site of the Mizbeach. And that could be a sign of the Jewish people doing what they are supposed to, which is the worship, the sacrificing being centered around a single site, being centered around the Mishkan, exactly as it should be. Nevertheless, let's go back. This is what the Mizbeach looks like without getting too much into it. What is the very next thing that the Jewish people, where would we look next if we wanted to find a Mizbeach, if we wanted to find a sacred site, an altar, a sanctuary. We are told that Joshua is instructed to go to Har Eval, to take the Jewish people. Already in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses describes how the Jewish people are to go to the mountains of Mount Gerizim and Mount Eval, and over there they are supposed to erect standing stones covered in plaster, on which Joshua is instructed to write the entire Torah, and the sages say in 70 languages. I've got my professor of archaeology said that if he could find one thing that would be the greatest find of imaginable, that would be to find the stones of Joshua with the entire Torah written on them, dating back to the time of Joshua, because that would answer all the questions, all the doubts, all the skeptics wouldn't have a foot to stand on as soon as we found those. Why won't we found those? Because they were written in plaster. It wasn't written on the stone itself. So it's very unlikely that that plaster was supposed to be a temporary thing. Plaster doesn't survive. Nevertheless, where exactly is all of this? Where exactly do we find all of this? Well, let's go back to Google Earth, shall we? And here we are. Okay, so over here we have got Argaman in the Jordan Valley. And up if we zoom out a bit so we can see the entire country, there we go. Up in the mountains, we will find our next site, which is Har Gerizim, Har Eval over here. This is Har Eval, and if we zoom out just a little bit from it, we can see, let me, okay, there we go. A sec. There we go. Yeah, Har Eval over here. We can see that it is right over here, the city of Nablus, or Neapolis, more anciently known as Shechem. The most ancient part of Shechem is right over here. You can see it says Balata. Tel Balat is the refugee camp, but right over there, just north of that, is the most ancient part of the city of Shechem. Shechem lies in a very fertile valley, which we can see has got surrounded by mountains on its north over here and its south over there, and on its east. The Jewish, so Shechem is a Arab Muslim city within the Palestinian territories. It is Area A, which means it's controlled completely by the Palestinian Authority. However, just to the east of it, northeast, you have got Elon Moreh, you have got Har Bracha to the south, you've got a kind of a ring of Yeshuvim, of Jewish settlements just to the south and around Shechem. Nevertheless, we are looking over here at Har Eval, and this is where Adam Zertal found his next big thing. And this one has been in the news. I'm sure some of you have seen it. There was a lot of talk about destruction of a wall from the time of Joshua. So exactly, if you're wondering exactly where that is, now you know. That was the site. Firstly, what was the wall that was destroyed? Yeah, it was an ancient wall going back to the Iron Age, to the time of Joshua. However, it wasn't the altar, the Mizbech itself. It was an external wall of the entire site, and it was damaged during the building of a road between the outlying Arab villages over here and the city of Shechem, and the contractor which was building the road just demolished a part of the wall, and restoration work has been undertaken by the Palestinian Authority. Nevertheless, the site is not very well kept, and it's kind of difficult to get to for a very simple reason. You need to have a military escort just to get there. You need to be in a armored vehicle surrounded by army jeeps and with constant protection. Nevertheless, some people do. People do just go there by themselves. I wouldn't recommend it, but a lot of the other sites that we are going to visit today are a lot easier to access. In any case, what is at the top of the hill? So this is what it looks like from a distance. I apologize a little bit because we're going to see a lot of just weird piles of stones. Nevertheless, we'll try to use our imagination and use our mind's eye to figure out what they look like. That pile of stone is what Adam Zertal believed to be the Mizbech. Rav Yoel bin Nun of Yeshivat Har Etzion, who's a bit of, like Adam Zertal, he's a bit of a maverick of his own variety. He wrote an entire paper. If anyone wants to the details, I can send it your way. Why he believes that Adam Zertal is correct and why this meets the description of the halachic definition of a Mizbech, how it's used, made out of field stones. Firstly, Adam Zertal did the academic part. He dated it to the time. He managed to find scarabs, to find seals buried underneath the stones, which means that they were part of they were left there during the initial construction, and that dates it to about 3,200 years ago, roughly the time of Yoshua. So it fits the right time. And Rav Yoel bin Nun, appropriately enough for the site of Yoshua bin Nun, Rav Yoel bin Nun believes that this has written entire describing the foundations and the splits, the fact that there are two fire pits. He describes why this fits the halachic description of a mizbech, of an altar. In any case, let's go back to that. What is, well, actually, no, let's continue over here. Well, we've got this, and the tribes all gather at Har Grizim, Har Eval, and then they do the brachot and the klalot, the blessings and the curses as described by Moshe Rabbeinu and as instructed to Yehoshua, the warnings of how we are to live in the land and what we should do if we wish to continue living in the land of Israel. And then each tribe goes on its own way. And we find that this is what happens. We've got the split of each of the tribes, Yehuda in the south, we've got the various tribes in the north, and then we get a couple of other things happening. Firstly, where is the center of worship? After the Mishkan leaves Gilgal, where does it go? The place, of course, is Shiloh. Yep, fantastic. And right over here, we got, this is just one of the understandings of exactly what the Mishkan looked like. Described, supposed to be a temporary building. Nevertheless, it stood for around approximately 400 years at Shiloh. 400 years total, majority of that time at Shiloh. And Shiloh itself is fascinating because let's have a look at this. What they've done, and I can send this link as well, is they've created a site and they've created a website as well, which allows an amazing view of and the ability to visit in panoramic view the site of Shiloh. And they found many ancient things, but over here there is a basilica, which is on the site of an ancient church, but nevertheless they have repurposed it as the site of the model of the, there we go, the site of the model of the Mishkan, which they have over here. And firstly, it tells us that you can see there is a model of the Mishkan, and that is, tells us firstly, wait, sorry, let me just exit from here, and we shall continue our tour. Now, why do I mention this? Because here we go, a aerial view of the entire site. We can see that we have a beautiful, beautiful landscape of the Shomron. This is Shiloh itself, the Yeshuva of Shiloh, modern day. And right over here, we've got, there's the model, which I was standing at earlier. They've got a beautiful visitor center. It is definitely worth a visit if you find yourself in the neighborhood. And if we can just look around us a bit, there we go. What they believe to have done over here, firstly, they've created a, over there right in the center, you can see the visitor center, but they've created what they believe, they've found what they believe to be the site of the Mishkan. And the reason behind this is because it fits the dimensions of the Mishkan. And you can see they've created a bit of a canopy over it. where it can be visited, but over here they've got an enhanced version of the site with the Mishkan superimposed on it, and it fits the description and the dimensions of the Mishkan. What they've also found around it are broken shards of pottery, which would suit the description of only being able to use dishes once, of not reusing dishes at the Mishkan. They found bones, archaeologists have found bones of kosher animals, which have been butchered and presumably may have served as sacrifices. But if we remove that, what we can see, right over there, we can see that this is the site of, well, believed to be the site of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, where it stood. So, what is, well, if we're talking about the Tanach, what are the most significant events that happens, the most significant event that happens at the site of the Mishkan, at the Mishkan itself, at Shiloh, is of course the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, the book of Samuel, which describes the birth of Shmuel and describes the beginning of, let me, there we go, stop sharing just for a moment, describes how the beginning of how Hannah, the mother of Shmuel, of the prophet Samuel, goes to the Mishkan in Shiloh with her husband, and how she is believed to be by Eli the Kohen, who thinks that she is drunk, and he tells her off. And the heartfelt prayer that she has is really one of the beginnings, one of the roots of our own tradition of tefillah, of prayer. Much of what we learn about tefillah comes from that part of the Tanakh. And what we also find is describes the end. The beginning of Sefer Shmuel also describes the end of the Mishkan. Why? Because we see that the Eiran is taken from Shiloh into battle by the sons of Eli. It's taken into battle against the Plishtim, against the Philistines, and it is captured by the Philistines in battle. And Eli himself is sitting at Shiloh. When the news comes to him, he falls backwards off his seat, and an elderly man, he thus perishes. He falls on this, he falls over and he dies. And it's a tragic end to the time of the Mishkan in Shiloh. What we find is that the Eiran, the ark, is taken by the Philistines, and there's again an entire episode which describes how the Philistines tried to put it in their own temple, in the temple of Dagon, and how in Ashdod, and how the idol of Dagon falls over. We see how the entire the Plishtim come to realize that there is something of great power here. There's something which they are unable to rule over, something that they are unable to control. And so we find that the Plishtim send the Eiran back. And what happens is that the Eiran is sent to Beit Shemesh, and I'm just south of Beit Shemesh at the moment myself. But what they have discovered, and this is definitely also going to be I was reading just 2 weeks ago, an agreement has been reached to establish a new national park at Tel Beit Shemesh as part of the ongoing excavations around the construction of Beit Shemesh. Beit Shemesh is growing. It's just about doubled in size in the last 10 years, and it keeps growing bigger. And the main access road to the city, the modern city of Beit Shemesh, passes over the Tel of Beit Shemesh. And part of what they did in order to build that road, they did a massive excavation, and they found much, much more in terms of antiquities than they were prepared for. And so we find that the whole of Beit Shemesh, the whole of Tel Beit Shemesh, has been exposed, and they're building a new national park around it. One of the things that they discovered is a massive stone, a large stone table, not quite a mizbeach, but a table, flattened stone. Why is that significant? Because after the Plishtim after the Philistines sent the Eiran back, where does it go? It follows the Mesilah, the straight path to the town of Beit Shemesh. Mesilah today means, in modern Hebrew, means a railway, a rail, and the railway passes, at least the old railway up to the city of Jerusalem passes through Beit Shemesh, because that is the flattest road. The people of Beit Shemesh take the Eiran, take the ark, and they place it on a large stone. and what they believe they may have found is that. It remains to be seen. I suppose I can't, personally, I'm very excited national park to be opened, and I definitely want to recommend it to the rest of you when you get the chance to definitely visit that new national park of Beit Shemesh. Nevertheless, let's jump ahead, because what happens if the Eiran, the ark, is in Beit Shemesh, eventually it moves onwards, the Mishkan is no more, and next up we find that the entire political reality changes as well. Rather than having the 12 tribes scattered, they are finally united. And I mentioned it already that I am just outside, I'm sitting at the Elah Valley, and that is where David defeated Goliath. King David is, okay, let's just go back to this. King David unites the kingdom. He unites the tribes, and he creates a new monarchy. And while he intends to build the Beit HaMikdash, he is unable to. And it's a bit odd, I feel. It's a bit strange for me to be discussing altars and holy places and speaking so little about the Beit HaMikdash, about the temple in Jerusalem. And I think the best metaphor I have to describe that is because it's a bit of a black hole in more than one way. Firstly, in terms of its mass, it's so much greater than everything else. It's so much more important, so much more central, that it's kind of eclipses everything else. And if we were to talk about that in the kind of detail and depth that it really deserves, we wouldn't be able to. And it's also a black hole in another sense, in that no light comes out. Unfortunately, there's has never been a real archaeological dig on the Temple Mount. Anything that we can try to understand is conjecture from the surface. So there is relatively little that we can actually do, and very little that we can actually understand. So we're just going to mention it in passing, unfortunately, but please don't misunderstand that to mean that it is less important, rather that it is so much more. Anyway, over here we have Har Eval, we have Shechem, and if we jump forward, I'm sharing, yes, if we jump forward, just south of that, we have got Shiloh, and this is Tel Shiloh. You can see the entire site, and you can see where they believe that the Mishkan stood over there. If we zoom out a bit, we can see south of Shiloh. Well, over here, we've got Tel Beit Shemesh, and there we go. This is the main road that I described, and over here, this is the Tel. This is where they have done a massive excavation, where the new national park is planned for. From Beit Shemesh, we of course find that the Eiran moves eventually to Harabite, to the Temple Mount, to the city of Jerusalem, and really just in passing, I wanted to show you this, which is a map which is going to come up later, because over here we can see this, well, over here we've got, this is the Beit HaMikdash. You can see the modern Temple Mount, and you can see that the Temple Mount used to be much, much smaller. The Beit HaMikdash of Shlomo, which is the higher one. I apologize if this is a bit blurry. I've got a massive poster version, but this was the digital version that I could find. Right over there is the Efen Shetia, the foundation stone. That is where the Eiran, the ark, stood. The Mizbeach, the altar, stood just outside of over there, near the entrance of the Beit HaMikdash. You can see how massively expanded the site was. This is from the first Beit HaMikdash into the second Beit HaMikdash. And, well, what happened next? Well, firstly, we've got, over here, we've got the split of the kingdom going through. I mean, I'm sure you can see this progression. We've moved on from the Sefer Shmuel Aleph, with just the into Shmuel Bet, and finally the book of Sefer Melachim, the book of Kings, which we find something else happens. We find that there is a split, a division between the two kingdoms, the kingdom of Yehudah and the south kingdom of Israel in the north. And what happens? We find that there are new temples, there are new altars which are constructed. Why is that? Because Jeroboam, the king of Israel, he is worried that the people, if allowed to go to make aliyah l'regel, if allowed on the festivals, if they can go to sacrifice the Korban Pesach in Yerushalayim, which you can see is right in the middle, then what is he concerned about? That they will not come back afterwards. And so he does something. He builds new sanctuaries, new sanctums, new temples. He puts up statues of calves, where one in the southern part of his kingdom and one right in the northern part of his kingdom. And this northern part also takes us back to another episode in the Sefer Shoftim, the book of Judges, where this same site happens. The same site is mentioned, and this is Dan. What we can see over here, this is a metal frame which shows the dimensions of the Mizbeach of the altar. And on the left-hand side, you can see stairs going up. Is this a Mizbeach as described in the Torah, as we are supposed to use? No. A couple of reasons why. Firstly, look how it is carved. Look at the dimensions of the Mizbeach. The dimensions are roughly right, but it's made out of huge stones, which is the exact opposite. In addition of what we are supposed to use. In addition, there are stairs going up to the Mizbeach. What is a Mizbeach supposed to have? Not stairs, but a ramp. This is a Mizbeach of Dan. And over there on the right-hand side, you can see this is part of a sanctuary of a compound which is rebuilt, but which is believed to have been the place where Yeravam had his mikdash. And over here, we can see a closer view of those stairs and of the Mizbeach. And the other place where he did this is in right over there in the southern part. That was on the northern border of his territory. On the southern border, south of the city of Shechem, is Beit El. And that is where we see over here. This is an aerial view of Beit El. There's much less to see than in Dan. Nevertheless, they've got a site. This is where Yaakov had his potentially identified by Zev Vilnai, geographer and ethnographer, fascinating individual. He felt that this was the site where Yaakov's dream occurred. That was where Yeravam built his temple, and that is what occurred. During the time of the Beit HaMikdash, in addition to the rival sites in the north, there were other places which shouldn't have existed. For example, this is a horned altar, and this is gives us the idea of what the altar looked like in Dan. This is from Be'er Sheva, and this is believed to have been possibly an altar to Asherah, one of the idols, one of the false gods, and we can see that snake inscription is believed to have been idolatrous. This is an incense altar from Megiddo, also in the north, which is also not supposed to happen. But it is no surprise to us that the Jews are not always doing exactly what they are supposed to. That idol worship, that altars, that sanctuaries occurring in other places than where they should in the city of Yerushalayim. However, one of the most fascinating is Arad. And over here we can see this is a view from down below. This is how it looks today, an entire fortress sitting up on top of the hill. It's an amazing place to visit. It's a national park. And it's got every single site that I'm mentioning today has got much, much more than the bits that I'm cherry picking. In particular, the sanctuaries, the mizbachot, the altars. But the city of Arad definitely has got a lot more. There's Canaanite, there's other amazing finds. But that fortress, seen from the air, looks like that. And inside it, there is a mikdash ma'at, a small mikdash. Firstly, we know that it seems to have been a place where they were worshipping Hashem. They weren't worshipping Asherah. They weren't worshipping golden calves. They seem to have been worshipping Hashem, but this place seems to be a bama. This is one of the high places which is condemned and which is erased as part of the reforms of King Yoshiao. In fact, what we find is that this entire place has got a Kodesh HaKodashim of sorts. It's got a Mizbeach. This is the Mizbeach, this time not carved out of carved stones, but this is filled stones, which is, once again, more in line with the way that a Mizbeach should be according to the Torah. In addition, this is what they call, at least, the Holy of Holies, but they've got 2 incense altars over there, and 2, in addition to Mizbachot, they've got Matzevot. A Matzeva is a standing stone, and the standing stone, Rav Shimshon Rafael Hirsch describes the difference between a mizbech and a matzeva. A mizbech is a place where you actively put together. It's a part of such service of Hashem in the active sense, and a matzeva is in the passive sense. And he says that the reason why the matzevas are banned after that, we see that Yaakov put up a matzeva at Beit El, which we saw earlier. The reason why, Rav Shimshon Hirsch says that matzeva is banned because it separates between the passive and the active elements of service of Hashem. We are supposed to serve Hashem both with our active and our passive elements. In any case, what is really interesting is that they did a residue study from the incense altars over here. Anyone read about this one? Do you know what they found? The residue from the incense altars at Arad shows that what the people were burning was a mixture of, firstly, animal dung, which not for its smell, just as probably camel dung means it's very dry and a good source of getting something burning. What they were actually burning was marijuana. 3,000 years ago, 3,000 plus years ago, no, 2,600 or so, 2,900 years until the reform of Yoshiel, the incense altars in Arad were used for burning marijuana. Without judgment or any further comment, I'm just going to leave that there. Another thing which is really interesting is, let's go back to Google Earth. I'm just open up that one. So from there, we jumped to Tel Dan over here. There we go. Yeah, I hope no one gets motion sickness. We're finishing off over here with a couple of other things. We mentioned Dan, Beit El. Okay, put in Har Gerizim next, but I'll just go back over here. In Motza, which is also on the main road between just outside of Yerushalayim, there's a very fertile valley, which they found some amazing things, most of which unfortunately have been reburied because they are building a massive, they've built a highway and they're building a new entrance to Yerushalayim, which is going to tunnel underneath Har Nof. And it's got some bridges. There's a very, very fertile valley called at Motza. And one of the things that they discovered there was another temple, which this one seems to have occurred roughly about from the time of Shlomo or so until the time of Yoshiyahu. It tells us something we're not surprised about, that Jews were not always behaving themselves. They weren't always just keeping to the Beis HaMikdash, because this doesn't seem to have been a temple dedicated just to Hashem, unlike Arad, which was a Pama. This seems to have been a idolatrous temple. They found these little human figurines. They found horses and various other things. They found a ram statue as well. I just wanted to jump from there to Har Gerizim, because this is amazing, and we'll, towards the end of our time, start seeing as well. Har Gerizim, if we go back to Google, keep on clicking that tab, here we go. Har Gerizim is over here. This is the valley of Shechem, and to the south of it is Har Gerizim. To the north of it is Har Eval, which is where we just we visited just a few minutes ago, the possible site of the altar of Yehoshua. But Adam Zertal, by the way, doesn't believe that Har Gerizim is this plot spot with the blue marker. He says that it is this Har Kabir, where we see Alon Moreh. That's its own discussion for another time. Nevertheless, Har Gerizim over here, we've got a yeshur called Har Bracha. And over here, there is a little village on top of Har Gerizim called Kiryat Luza, which is inhabited by a small community of people called the Shomronim, the Samaritans. I don't know if our calendar matches up this year, because they've also got a 19-year calendar cycle, but it's not always on the same year within the cycle. What does that mean? Is that some years they celebrate Pesach at the same time as us. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they celebrate it a month later. And if you go a month after Pesach, you can actually watch them doing their Korban Pesach, because the Shomronim, the Samaritans, believe themselves to be the descendants of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, of the 10 tribes. And they say that unlike the Jewish tradition that they were lost in exile, they say we never went anywhere. There are only 700 of them left in the world, but they've got a little village on top of the mountain, and it is all around this site, which is marked Har Gerizim, which is a fascinating, fascinating place. Because if I were to ask you how many places where can you find the place, how many Batei Mikdash have there been? Usual answer is 2. First Batei Mikdash, second Batei Mikdash, the end. But if we actually look in Jewish history, the places that have had a Beit HaMikdash, i.e. a place dedicated to the service of Hashem, of the one God of the Avot and of the Jewish people, you'd find that there's the ones that happened on the Har HaBayit. There's also one over here on Har Gerizim. There's one in Egypt on the island of Elephantini or Yeb, by the first cataract on the Nile. There was a Beit HaMikdash built. There was another one. There was at least one more in Egypt. There was a whole different variety of these. But I just want to talk about this one on Har Gerizim. And you can see the shape of it over there. There's an entire, this is also a national park, actually, can be visited. And this one, unlike Har Eval, doesn't need special coordination with the army. It's a lot easier to visit. And the Shomronim are fascinating people. They've got their own alphabet. They got their own rites and rituals. They don't believe in they say that the Tanach ends halfway through Sefer Yehoshua. Everything else, they say, is made up. They claim that they're the real Israelites, and that while we are Israelites, we are not the real deal, that they are. Nevertheless, what they had is they had their own mikdash, they had their own sanctuary over there. And over here, we can see, firstly, an aerial view of it. It was, why does it look so strange? Because you've got multiple different levels of historical remains. You've got, going back, at least discovered over here, Persian, Hellenistic, going to the Greek time period, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, and at the top over here, there is actually an octagonal structure. What else is an octagonal structure? The most famous is the Dome of the Rock. And both of these were probably based on they were both based on a church called the Katisma Church, which is on Derech Hebron in Yerushalayim. Nevertheless, what happened over here is that the Christians co-opted the site of the holy site of the Shomronim, the Mikdash, the sanctuary of the Shomronim, which means this is kind of like a alternative universe version of Har HaBayit. And if you look at it that way, it's like, what if Har HaBayit had not had Herod to expand it massively? It was much smaller. And this is kind of the shape and the size of what it would have looked like. And it's a fascinating place to visit. It's a fascinating place to see. We can even do a brief flyover. Over there, you can see Shechem in the background, Nablus in the background. You can see the octagonal ruins of the church. You can see there's a sheikh's tomb over there. And there is Kiryat Loza, which is the place of the Shomronim. That's the village where the Shomronim, the Samaritans, live. Other things that they have over there, the 12 stones. Remember I told you about Yoshua and his stones, which with the description with the entire Torah. They believe that this is the site. We say it was on the, so they, according to their tradition, this is the place where Yoshua came to, Har Gerizim and Har Eval. Anyway, just wanted to share one last thing. We're kind of leaving the domain of the Tanach now behind, but just when I was excavating at Marei Shab, which is a Hellenistic site, found something quite interesting. It was a little small stone, which you can see over there, small rectangular stone. And if you look closely, you can see that there's some scratches in the side of it. This is an altar. This is also this is an incense altar dedicated to the Greek gods. Nevertheless, I mean, it was an amazing experience to just pick this up out of the ground and to hold it with my own hands. That connection to the past, thought I'd share that as well. So this took us, hope it wasn't too much of a whirlwind, but we we kind of looked through the eyes of the Tanach. We looked at some of the holy places, and we saw, firstly, we discussed what the idea of Aliyah L'Regel is. We saw the Kaf Regel of Argaman, and we discussed what the Aliyah L'Regel meant to Jews in different time periods, whether it was that all of the Jews joining together with Yehoshua at Har Gerizim, Har Eval, whether it was during the time of the Mishkan, and how that Aliyah L'Regel is what led to the beginnings of the prayer of Chana, the birth of Shmuel, and much of our tefillot of today. Whether it was later when after the destruction of the Mishkan, whether it was just the Aron in Beit Shemesh, or whether it was the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. In addition, we just had a brief look at some of the competing sites, whether they were sites such as Arad, which served as a bama, whether it was sites as Har Gerizim, which served as a competing tradition, shall we say, for the site of the Beit HaMikdash. In fact, just a brief aside, the Shomronim have got their own version of the Torah, and with added verses. Every time when the Torah says, the place which Hashem shall choose, B'makom asher yivchar Hashem l'shachen shemo sham, they add in the words Bahar Gerizim, on Har Gerizim, in case anyone was wondering. It's not Har HaMoriah, it is Har Gerizim. Nevertheless, that is a tradition which we very firmly reject, but it's also just fascinating, and perhaps it's fascinating. If you even go online, you can find videos, you can find accounts of the Shomronim, the Samaritans, and their Korban Pesach, and it just gives us a small sense of what we are missing. May we see the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, may we see the true Aliyah L'Regel, and may we see Jewish people gathered in to serve Hashem as we should. Thank you. Any questions?